Waters off the coast of England. A team of modern adventurers penetrate the ocean's depths using the most sophisticated search equipment to uncover another of the world's famous shipwrecks. Join the sea hunters as they discover the final resting place of the ship that saved the Titanic survivors, RMS Carpathia. With over 100 million books in print, Clive Cussler is the Grand Master of shipwreck tales and adventure. Director of the Vancouver Maritime Museum, James Delgado is one of the world's foremost marine archaeologists. With over 20 years wreck diving experience, Mike Fletcher is an internationally renowned professional diver. Leading the Econova dive team, John Davis has coordinated shipwreck searches around the globe. Together, they explore the planet's last frontier in search of true adventures with famous shipwrecks. They are the Sea Hunters. Intrigued by shipwrecks that have not had their stories fully told, Sea Hunters Clive Cussler and James Delgado have resolved to find the ocean liner famous for rescuing the Titanic survivors, RMS Carpathia. Carpathia's story is a daring tale of heroism and bravery, played out in the face of great tragedy. On April 15th, 1912, the world received news that the great ship Titanic had sunk with many lives lost. Of the vessels that answered her cries for help, only one arrived in time to rescue survivors: the canard-built passenger liner, RMS Carpathia. Carpathia's high-speed dash through the ice-filled North Atlantic and a rescue of hundreds of Titanic survivors was one of the largest open-sea rescues ever recorded, and remains a testament to the incredible courage of her captain and crew. Carpathia's glory was short-lived, however. Just 6 years later, fate would place Carpathia once more in the path of tragedy. It was during World War I on July 17, 1918. RMS Carpathia had been pressed into convoy service, carrying troops and supplies across the Atlantic to the raging war. Along this supply line, laying in wait, were sea hunters of a different breed: the deadly German U-boats. One of these U-boats, U-55, intercepted Carpathia en route from Liverpool to New York. For Captain Werner, commander of U-55, the passenger cargo liner must have made an enticing target. At approximately 9:15 a.m., he took aim and fired at the great ship. The first torpedo struck the engine room midships. 3 stokers and 2 firemen were killed. The second struck just aft of the first. Captain Werner repositioned U-55 and fired the death blow. With 3 mortal wounds, Carpathia at last succumbed. At 12:40 a.m., she sank to the ocean floor. In early 1999, adventurer and author Clive Cussler began to assemble a team to search for Carpathia. His motive? That which has driven explorers throughout the ages.
Curiosity. You know, because the Titanic story is so fabulous, so well known, with all this notoriety, but nobody ever told me what happened to the Carpathia or the California. So I started researching to see and found out, coincidentally, they were both torpedoed in World War I. The California off Greece in the Mediterranean. And I thought about looking for that one, but that's 13,000 feet deep. And of course, there's not a good position for it, so scratch the California. So that left the Carpathia, which, of course, turns out wasn't too far off the tip of Southern Ireland. So here I thought we stood a chance.
Initial research showed that both British Admiralty and French Admiralty charts indicated a wreck site located within 6 kilometers, one of the last reported sites given for Carpathia. This charted site will become the team's first target. Shipwreck hunter Graham Jesson was enlisted to put a ship and crew together to find this wreck and attempt an identification. Graham brings a wealth of experience to the search. His father, Keith Jesson, is one of the world's most successful shipwreck hunters. Once the site information was verified, the team boarded the Ocean Venture, captained by Gary Goodyear, for the sail out of Penzance, England. To reach the search area, they must head over 322 kilometers southwest into the open North Atlantic. Upon arrival at the latitude-longitude position indicated on the charts, the team began the arduous task of running grid lines over the site using the forward-seeking sonar. The forward-seeking sonar sends signals out in a sweeping arc in front of the ship to detect anything in its path. If it detects something, it will be displayed on the screen, and the captain can then head in the direction of the object. Another type of search equipment they will use is called side-scan sonar. The side-scan sonar scans the bottom out from the sides of the ship as it travels through the water. The signal that it generates is received and printed out, allowing the team to see a three-dimensional picture of the bottom. By traveling in carefully spaced parallel lines, the team can map out the entire search area and have a complete printout of any possible shipwreck sites. This is the daily work of sea hunters. Patience and an attentive mind are the skills required. The only thing that can shorten the time it takes to work the search grid is good luck and great information. After hours of scanning the search grid, the sonar has turned up a target. It lies in 160 meters of water, 11 kilometers east of Carpathia's last reported position. The long-range, low-resolution side scan creates an image that gives a good estimate of the target's dimensions, but does not provide much detail. After a careful assessment of the image, the team realized they have a wreck similar in size and shape to Carpathia. Carpathia's keel was laid in Walson Shipyard in England, near Newcastle upon Tyne in September 1901. Work on the ship was finished about a year later, and she was launched in August 1902. She wasn't designed for the first-class trade. Carpathia's 1,500 third-class passengers enjoyed accommodations that set a standard for the day. These passengers could dine in a wood-paneled saloon, which sat 300 in revolving chairs. They could mingle in the large smoking room or the ladies' sitting room, socialize in the bar, or stroll along the covered promenade. The 200 or more second-class passengers paid for and received a higher standard of service. Their dining saloon sat a more exclusive 200. There was even a well-stocked library. In the early 1900s, Carpathia transported passengers and mail over several routes, including the run from New York to the Mediterranean. It was during one of these runs that she received Titanic's desperate message, the message that launched her high-speed race to the scene of the unimaginable. The assessment of the side scan image has convinced the team to deploy the Remote Operating Vehicle, ROV. This submersible robotic vehicle is controlled from the ship, and when the wreck is too deep for divers, as is this one, the ROV becomes the eyes of the search team, sending back images that will allow the team to identify the wreck. Captain Gary Goodyear has positioned the Ocean Venture directly over the wreck site. To minimize the length of cable between the ship and the ROV, a tether management system, TMS, is used. This submersible cage is lowered to within 15 meters of the wreck, where the ROV is deployed. From the cage, the cable can be reeled out by the operator, thereby reducing the pull of the current on the ROV. And less cable means less risk of it being entangled in the wreckage. The first images show a vessel which appears to be turned completely upside down. The wreck is covered with plant life and anemones. Areas of the hull are broken away, exposing the ribbing. Lost fishing nets are ensnared in the wreckage, creating dangerous traps for the ROV. Gary is cautious. A survey of the site reveals a debris field containing artifacts from the ship. A large area is strewn with ship's china. If this is Carpathia, these items would show the Cunard Line insignia. The markings on this dish, however, are inconclusive. There is something else. A human bone. A gruesome indication that this vessel took someone to the bottom with her. Could this be one of Carpathia's casualties? Traveling toward the stern, the team sees dual propellers, a feature similar to Carpathia, but not uncommon for a ship of this size. Circling the stern, it becomes clear that these are four-bladed propellers. The team knows that at the time of her building, Carpathia was fitted with three-bladed propellers. This looks to be conclusive evidence that this is not Carpathia. But there is always the possibility that she had been retrofitted with new props, perhaps at the start of the war. If this wreck is not the Carpathia, the question then becomes, what vessel has the team discovered? Because this ship is completely inverted and nothing of the superstructure is visible, a positive identification through visual means is nearly impossible. In every instance, the sea hunters attempt to be non-intrusive in their dealings with shipwrecks. Their intent is to bring back images and to reveal the fascinating histories of the wrecks they encounter. Any decision to remove an artifact is carefully considered. Finally, the team decides to attempt to bring up one piece of the ship's china from the debris field. The ROV's shepherd's hook will be used for this operation. It will require immense skill on the part of the operator to achieve this, rather like threading the eye of a needle using a joystick from 160 meters away. He's got it. By maneuvering the ROV, he managed to hook the eye. Now, he must transport the fragile China back through the ocean currents to the tether management system. One strong twist of fate could snap the handle and send our hopes of identification to the bottom. As the ROV is maneuvered back to the tether management system, the currents tug at the China, threatening to snap the fragile handle. Will it hold just a few more seconds? Once back to the cage, the challenge becomes to gently as possible secure the ROV without losing the China. He's done it. Happy to have the China piece on board, they now can inspect it for markings that could possibly identify the wreck.
Well, John, it's a really nice looking gravy boat. I don't know if you can see there, John, but real fine detail in there. We've got the letters HAL, which seems to signify to me the Hamburger Miracle line. We do have a little 28 in here, which could signify 1928. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but we'll certainly find out once we get back on shore.
The wreck isn't Carpathia. The weather is closing in as the season winds to a close. Ocean Venture must return to port, where the team can more closely examine the China and determine its origin and how it wound up on the ocean floor.
When they put the ROV down on this wreck, first thing we discovered was that the propeller blades, there were 4 of them instead of 3, as on the Carpathia. And then we pulled up a soup tureen, and when we cleaned it off and read the bottom, instead of Canard, it said Hamburg American Lines. And so when we researched out this ship, we found it was called the Isis, and it went down in 1936 in a terrible storm, killed all the crew. The only survivor was the cabin boy. But it was just a wreck that somehow slipped through the cracks and was swept under the carpet.
Although finding the Isis is simply a footnote to the team's search for Carpathia, they can't help but think of that ship's last moments when huge waves crushed the vessel's bow and sent her to the bottom. Today, our sights are set on Carpathia, but we remember the long-forgotten tragedy of the Isis. We remember and confirm her position as a grave marker for the victims of this forgotten tragedy. The following spring, Captain Gary Goodyear has readied his ship for another search. Econova expedition leader John Davis and dive coordinator Mike Fletcher joined Graham Jessup in Penzance, England, to resume the search for Carpathia. With the wreck on the Admiralty charts now identified as the Isis, the team looked to additional information that had been gathered regarding the final resting site of Carpathia. The research uncovered 3 independent reports of Carpathia's location when she was torpedoed. One from the U-boat U-55, one from the mine-sweeping sloop HMS Snowdrop, and thirdly, one from the Carpathia. After a 20-hour journey, the Ocean Venture reaches the area marked by the sub's coordinates. The side scan and magnetometer are dropped, and the team begins to run lines around the position reported by the U-boat.
Okay, fish going over.
The team mentally prepares themselves for a long search. The wreck is much like a needle in their 484 square kilometer haystack. It is a large area to search, but the team is confident that with a workable pattern, the right equipment, and patience, they'll find what they're looking for. It is this equipment and the careful observations of the Sea Hunter team which are required to uncover history and to reopen a doorway to the past. After 72 hours of running grid lines over the northern section of the search area, which encompassed the U-boat quadrant, the team has not come up with a single promising target. At this point, the team decided to steam to the southern portion of the search grid, the area which contains the Carpathia and Snowdrop positions, and to work the grid pattern to the north. After 12 hours of running lines, the sonars return a target. Finally, a hit. The magnetometer is indicating a large amount of ferrous metal within 5.5 kilometers of the final position given by r.m.s. Snowdrop. Immediately, Gary Goodyear inspects the side scan recorder for a mark. Could this be Carpathia?
The mag is decreasing now, so we've passed the strongest part of the target.
What I need to know is whether it's 3,300 or not 13,500.
Yeah, you're going right beside it. See it on the side scan now.
Yeah. That is.
The target, although clearly man-made, is not Carpathia. The size and shape of this object indicates a broken portion of vessel. With a weather forecast of gale force winds, Captain Gary Goodyear decides to postpone the search and head Ocean Venture to the nearest port, Baltimore, Ireland. Baltimore is a small fishing village 14 hours to the northeast of the search area. The time off will provide the team with the opportunity to meet with fishermen and gather more information about possible wreck sites. It is often the case that fishermen lose fishing gear on wrecks and mark them carefully so they can be avoided on future trips. First mate John Mayo Evans and Graham Jessup speak with the local dive shop owner. He directs them to a fisherman's trawler that had recently been purchased from a Spanish fishing captain who worked trawling in the area of the search grid. Fishermen's hookups can be important clues for shipwreck hunters. Fishermen take great pains to carefully mark on chart sites where they tear and lose their expensive trawling gear. For fishermen, these sites are to be avoided. For shipwreck hunters, they represent carefully recorded clues, which could represent the object of their search. In the navigational computer, the Spanish captain had programmed the locations of 28 bottom hookups in and around the Carpathia search area, which posed a hazard to the bottom-dragging trawler nets. Of the 28 locations, 17 fall within the search area. Some are likely to be shipwrecks. One of them may be Carpathia.
So when you're ready, do you want me to just do starboard and port? Okay.
While inshore, Mike Fletcher checks some of the side scan equipment to ensure it is working properly. For an expedition like the search for Carpathia, the Ocean Venture is equipped with the most up-to-date technical equipment. Carpathia was also equipped with the most up-to-date equipment of the day. She boasted a new Marconi wireless system, a recent safety innovation on Cunard liners. Wireless operator Harold Cotton was a young man fascinated by this amazing new technology. On the night of April 14th, 1912, Carpathia was on course for Gibraltar from New York and carrying about 700 passengers. Although it was after midnight and past the end of his watch, Cottam was listening to transmission from Cape Cod and called up the Titanic to inform them of messages waiting at this long-distance radio station. The message Titanic eventually returned was a desperate cry for help. Cottam received Marconi's standardized distress signal, CQD, popularly interpreted as "Come Quick, Danger," and information about the Titanic's dilemma. Titanic also sent out a new signal, SOS. The lone radio man raced to the bridge to deliver his message to unbelieving officers. He then barged into the captain's stateroom.
Captain, wake up! What is it? The Titanic, sir. It's sinking.
Arthur Rostron was the 42-year-old captain of the Carpathia. He listened in astonishment as Cottam reported that Titanic was requesting immediate assistance. Of the ships known to be nearest to the sinking Titanic, Carpathia was one of the farthest away, but faster at her top speed than most of the others. Another ship, the Californian, was nearby, but did not respond. A third ship, the schooner Samson, was in the area and may have been seen by Titanic passengers, but actually ran from the scene. Samson had no radio and was in the area sealing illegally. Mistaking the Titanic flares for those of a government patrol boat, it fled and didn't find out about the tragedy until almost a month later. Rostron's decision to come to the aid of Titanic, although made quickly, was not made lightly. In setting a course for Titanic, he was placing his ship in grave danger. He steered Carpathia north, directly into the immense ice floe that had just claimed Titanic. Once the bad weather had passed, Ocean Venture was restocked with water, food, and fuel and headed out to resume the search. On the way back to the search site, the newly acquired Spanish trawler hookups were plotted into the computer over the search box. The plan is to start from the northern end of the grid and work south, paying particular attention to the reported trawler hazards. Operating 24 hours a day, the Ocean Venture slowly worked its way through the grid. As the days pass, the team knows that time is running out.
Come on, baby. Yeah, I can do it.
It is early morning, and the sun is rising on the last possible day of the search. Anxiety is high as the ship approaches the 17th and final target in the extreme southwest end of the box. Then, a hit.
You would not believe what went across on the sounder. We had a full of 10 meters. Bang!
And it stayed up and then went right back down?
Yeah, it was a wreck. If ever I saw a wreck on a fish sounder, that was it.
The magnetometer starts to climb. It climbs very high and then goes further, right off the page. Clearly, a large magnetic anomaly. The sonar paper begins to mark out the profile of a very large obstruction. It's clearly a shipwreck. Gary Goodyear takes approximate measurements of the obstruction. Its dimensions are close to Carpathia's. This newly discovered wreck is about 5.5 kilometers from the Carpathia's coordinates. It lies in about 160 meters of water, too deep for conventional diving, but within easy reach of the remote operating vehicle. The side scan and magnetometer are reeled in. After so long at the clockwork routine of the searching, the crew are excited, thinking, this could be Carpathia. As Carpathia raced to the Titanic, anticipation crackled about the officers on the bridge. What would they find when they reached Titanic? Carpathia was 107 kilometers from Titanic's reported position. At a maximum speed of 14 knots, Rostron knew that it would take more than 4 hours to reach the Titanic. He needed more speed. All 3 shifts of stokers were called up. They shoveled coal until the needle on the steam gauge crept into the danger zone. The chief engineer hung his hat over the gauge while Rostron dodged icebergs and prayed. In the end, it took just over 3.5 hours to reach the bleak scene. The crew fired rockets to signal her arrival, but the silent icebergs offered no reply. The great liner was gone. Then, in the distance, a green flare. Someone was still alive. As Carpathia stood off the floe, small boats approached through the ice. The rescue was described by Luke Hoyt, a passenger on Carpathia, in a letter to a friend.
At first, nothing was to be seen, and it was supposed the Titanic had gone down with all on board. But soon appeared out of the dark of dawn, first one boat and the other, 18 in all, loaded with men, women, and children, and babies, most of them scantily clothed, some of the ladies in evening dresses, and the night so bitterly cold.
"705 survivors huddled in open lifeboats, half frozen, dazed and disorientated by the sight of their fellow passengers and loved ones disappearing beneath the waves with the unsinkable Titanic. By 9 o'clock, all the boats in sight had been brought on board. A passenger who witnessed the rescue reported that the survivors were received by the crew without any fuss or confusion, owing to the marvelous discipline always prevailing on a Cunarder. Had help not arrived, they would have been doomed. Carpathia's heroic dash through the ice-strewn North Atlantic saved them all. After reviewing the side scan images, the team knows they've found the most promising site yet. The next step is to put the ROV in the water to bring back images that will identify the wreck. The Ocean Venture is positioned over the site and the ROV readied and launched. Everyone is concerned about weather and time. Tension is high as the ROV begins its slow descent by way of the tether management system. Then, disaster. Just seconds after the ROV is launched, the crew detects a malfunction in the video system. It isn't long before the ROV crew confirms that there is a break in the umbilical cable and that cold salt water is causing electrical shorts in the delicate wiring. What's worse is that this problem can't be fixed on board. The cable will need to be replaced. There will be no video images today and no final identification of the wreck. Not on this voyage. The team, excited by the find, but disappointed at leaving the job unfinished, leaves the site to head back to shore. When the Leland liner Californian steamed up to the disaster site, Carpathia set a course for New York with her load of sorrow and misery.
We steamed 52 miles to get away around the ice floe, and it extended in the other direction beyond the horizon. We were over 1,100 miles out, and they were long, long days. We passed our time being mostly occupied with those poor unfortunates. I remarked to Mr. Weedman, "That Englishman in my room is in bad shape, and I'm going to get him a doctor." Immediately, a young woman lying on a lounge raised her head and said, "I wonder if it's my husband." Just think, Bird, of the hope and despair of that one moment. And there were about 150 maid widows on board, and the fatherless and the motherless, and the mothers without sons to the end of the chapter.
It took until the fall of 2000 to gather everyone together and return to the site of what the team all hoped was the Carpathia wreck. During the summer, an upgraded ROV system was installed on the Ocean Venture. Gary Goodyear will operate the ROV. The team is ready to survey the site. As it descends, the first images he sees are of the Ocean Venture's unique vertical propeller blades. The video system seems to be working well. The ROV dives to a depth of 160 meters. Through the silt and sediment, appears. These look to be shell casings. They could be from Snowdrop, as it was chasing a sub, firing its 4-inch gun. Very close by is a form which could be Carpathia's bell. Its true identity is obscured by vegetation. Gary sits in frustration, knowing that if he could only read a marking on the bell, the identification would be complete. He inches the ROV up the side of the vessel to a hatchway. Portholes, some with glass still in them, are visible on the hull. Light from these ports could have been the first signs of rescue seen by Titanic survivors as they huddled in their open lifeboats. Gary maneuvers to the deck of the ship. Here he sees dozens of trawl nets entangled in the wreckage. A big-headed conger eel silently slides past, making its way through the wreckage. Arriving at the stern of the ship, Gary sees the outline of a propeller. Does it have 3 blades? And there is the rudder and stern post. All are distinguishing marks that will help James Delgado confirm the wreck's identity. Gary feels an obstruction to his movement. He turns and follows his cable back to see what is holding him up. Hooking the ROV cable at 160 meters is serious business, as there is no way to humanly unhook it. He finds the cable snagged, wedged on the twisted metal of the deck, and guarded by a large conger eel who seems to stand guard against this intrusion. Somehow, he has to unhook it if he is to retrieve the ROV. With much skill, Gary maneuvers the ROV around in an attempt to free the umbilical cable from the snag. It seems as if the wreck doesn't want to let go, doesn't want to give up these images after more than 80 years of solitude. Finally, he breaks free. The ROV rises to the surface, bringing home the images the team hopes will confirm that they have seen the Carpathia once more after 8 decades of seclusion. Upon his return, John Davis reviews the tapes with James Delgado, world-renowned author and marine archaeologist. The question is, will James be able to definitively confirm that this is Carpathia?
There's the hatch. There's those winches looking forward. We should see... There it is. There it is. Mm-hmm. There it is. You can see that other one. There's the rudder. Look, see the bracing right alongside there?
Absolutely.
See, it's the same.
Absolutely.
There it is on the plan. There it is on the plane. There's a fish net wrapped around it. Look at that. Look. It's broken. The stern post is broken. Right there. There's the other propeller. Okay.
We're on the right wreck.
Well, I think we are, and I'm glad that we've been able to do it, archaeologically, and not just say, oh, we're in the right spot. That's got to be it. But doing it piece by piece, systematically, as scientists, that works. I think we've got an identification that's going to stand up.
Great.
A ship's bell half buried on the bottom, a deck torn and rusted. One might better imagine this heroic ship as it pulled into New York City that fateful day in April of 1912. It took 4 days for Carpathia to reach New York. Carpathia brought home the first eyewitness accounts and the only survivors in this tragic drama. 3 victims perished after their rescue. After a short service, each was returned to the sea. One of the survivors was a Marconi operator who sent several of Titanic distress signals, Mr. Harold Bride. In the months and years that followed, Carpathia and her crew were given all manner of awards and accolades. Cabinets were set up on Carpathia near the purser's office to house the various medals, cups, and mementos, commemorating the ship's gallant role in the rescue of the survivors of the Titanic disaster.
It's quite an honor. I'd like to introduce Dr. Clive Cussler, noted author and also noted sea hunter, one of his terms, who will carry on the story. Dr. Clive Cussler.
I'd like to thank the ladies and gentlemen of the news media for being here today. I think we'll have a story for you of really great interest. Much has been said about the Titanic, but the story cannot be fully told without the story of the Carpathia. the ship that raced through icebergs to rescue the survivors from the Titanic.
The efforts of Clive Cussler and his team of sea hunters searching the North Atlantic for Carpathia lasted nearly 2 years. And through skill, luck, and perseverance, the search for Carpathia was successful. The finding of this wreck is, in a way, another medal, another award, a remembrance of the daring and valor of Carpathia, her captain, and her crew. Knowing this, the Sea Hunters team will now go on to search for other great shipwrecks.
All of us archaeologists, of course, do what we do because there's no way human beings can connect with the past that is as sublime as finding the traces of the real thing. Otherwise, events are stories. They're abstract ideas. So a discovery like this one helps bring those stories back into the light and into the forefront, and it makes them real in a way that a photograph alone cannot.
The time and energy taken to bring these conclusive images to the world is dwarfed in comparison to the satisfaction of knowing the Sea Hunters have recaptured a part of history. The heroic efforts of the Carpathia and its crew will now be forever remembered.
Now, get off that couch, go into the mountains, go into the deserts, go under the lakes, under the rivers and the seas, and search for history. You'll never find a more rewarding experience.
Join us again as we search the oceans of the world for lost and famous shipwrecks. Another true adventure with the Sea Hunters.